We are going to talk about humans, not cats, unleashing the mystery of the two-legged relationship. Mary Frances is a leadership coach, DEI strategist, and community engagement consultant. The forever optimist, I love it. She values differences as the pathway to solutions facing our world. She has worked with Somali, AA, Latinx, rural and urban groups, people experiencing homelessness, youth, older adults, etc., to create and build relationships for change. She engages executives, managers, community members, and groups to thoughtfully build and sustain cross-cultural relationships in healthcare, government, corporate, nonprofit organizations, and community. Mary Frances is the mother of 2 adult sons and the daughter to 2 amazing parents. Her 4-legged furry family members, dogs named Vegas, like Las Vegas, and Nova, like Casanova, bring calm and joy to her life. She plays the flute, and the laughter of her children and children generally is music for life.
Good morning, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here. And just to hear Sterling talk a little bit about some of the opportunities and challenges facing the cat community in terms of just groups, you know, TR groups, shared purpose. So this is a wonderful setup, and I'll maybe even change this a little bit based on some of what I've learned by his presentation today. So yes, we're all trying to figure out the world we're in, right? 2-legged and 4-legged. And the 2-legged, we come with quite a few passion, and we're not here for the money. We're here for the passion of the work. And sometimes the passion is hard to manage when we're really doing good work, as you all are. So what we're going to do in our agenda today is we're going to just first talk about what Sterling talked about, is so what's the rationale, the purpose, what's the goal that's bringing us together, and why we are individually even into this, right? What gets us up in the morning. And then we're going to talk about cross-cultural dynamics, just why sometimes it's so hard to manage the cross-cultural dynamics, along with all the passion and COVID. We've all been changed forever. And then we're going to really sort of slip into pathways to diversifying your relationships. And I will try and spend a lot more time in the pathways to diversifying relationships. And during this session, I'll have questions, opportunities for you all to give some feedback to help me respond in real time to some of the concerns and make sure this stays on track. So first of all, I'd like everybody to just take a minute, take a deep breath. We got up Sunday morning. This is important, right? This is not a small thing in your life. The idea of cats being safe, fed, have homes. This is a passion that extends beyond your work week, right? So what brings you to this? Why is it so important to you? And I'd like you to take a minute and answer 3 of these following questions, and they're a little interrelated, but what opportunity or issue do you think could be better resolved or handled if there were more comprehensive and sort of more team relationships? Okay. What would be different in your organization, community, your group, or with you individually? What would be different? And what would that difference look like? Okay. So I want you to take a minute, think about these, put into the chat some of your responses to these. And Stacy will share some of those with me as well. Okay. So just a couple minutes, like do 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 do. Okay. Okay. So you have that down. Couple more minutes, seconds. We'll see.
I'm looking, I'm waiting here. So I will tell you if something pops up. More foster homes.
Okay. More foster homes. Okay. Well, we'll move forward, and please place any comments or thoughts you have along the way in the chat. Okay, that would be very useful. So the hashtag same team, I love it. Like this is the mojo that gets me up in the morning, because we are really all on the same team. And actually being on the same team, this can anchor you, but it can also have us really struggle with misinterpretation, judgments, right? And why? So because we're all so different, right? We all have arms and legs and eyes and nose. We breathe, we eat. We seem so similar, but really, when it comes down to it, our differences are pretty tremendous. Okay, we have varying beliefs, languages, practices, sometimes specific to a region or a specific cultural group, right? And some of the problems with that is you don't always see that, right? And this slide sort of helps spend a little time in that area. So out of curiosity, like there's several, but what countries is it considered rude to blow your nose in public, right? I don't know, I've always been blowing my nose in public within reason, right? What countries is it impolite to put your fork in your mouth? And I'm not sure, many Muslim and Hindu and Buddhist countries, showing the soles of your feet is a sign of disrespect. So if you're sitting down and you have your legs crossed and your foot is slightly into the air and someone can see the bottom of your sole of your foot, you're being disrespectful to the other person. Imagine that. Our orientation about who we are, what's acceptable, is pretty confined by culture, where we were born, the country where we were born in, our immediate family. And in the US, and I'm not sure if there are folks here from other countries, but in the US, there are 350 different languages spoke. We have rural and urban differences, and those are significant. I'm from Iowa. I grew up in Iowa City, and northern and southern rural communities have different ways of saying hello, which lets you know whether you're from northern or rural, and if you're from that community, right? Then we have millennial, baby boomers, Gen X, Gen Z. We've just, as a community, our philosophical approaches to work and our relationship to those around us are expressed by our age. Then we have introverted and extroverted. These are just some high level ones. Introverted and extroverted is very fascinating for a couple reasons. Is the extroverts get heard, right? Squeaky wheel, I'm an extrovert. I get heard. I'm a tendency to get heard more than others. But the introvert probably has a lot to say and is organizing the extrovert's thoughts and being able to kind of help navigate solutions. But there can be tension between the two because the introvert can feel overlooked and unheard. So then we have religion, spiritualities, and we can talk about politics forever, and we won't. we're all politics for cats, right? But certainly more subtle politics versus overt can very much get in the way of us seeing and being with each other. And then you have income and ethnicity. So based on how much money you earn, where you live in a community, as Sterling alluded to, some communities don't have resources to, or their priorities around cats might look a little different than a more resourced community, right? Income is huge. And then ethnicity, cultural groups have different attitudes and thoughts about cats and animals generally. And so this can create such walls of misunderstanding and judgment that we bring into a moment that we can't even begin to understand. And that's where we start to see judgments, misunderstanding, misinterpretation, stereotyping, bias, harm, trauma. And you mean like trauma? No, I mean trauma. There are cultural groups, neighborhoods that are statistically and consistently overlooked. Folks come in and do things to them and then leave, right? Groups come in and are the solution to the community's problems, and that community is not engaged around the solution, and that's traumatizing, and that's also harm. And so what we're going to talk about a little bit is sort of what is the individual, group, and sort of organizational opportunities to build your own understanding of yourself, because that's where it all starts, but then also to build understanding around the community in which you're interested in to engage. And largely it comes to pathways, right? Values are different. I might not even like some of the practices of other groups, right? And that I heard Sterling talk about too, related to cats, and approaches and philosophies around what's the best solution, right? So in those scenarios, how do you really create a goal and a mission and a purpose that helps anchor you? Okay. So first, just sort of spend some time building your understanding of yourself. And we'll intertwine some of these in here. Are you someone who's curious? Do you inquire? Do you ask? Or are you more telling? I'm a teller. I'll be honest with you, y'all see me, I'm a teller. I've had to learn how to be humble and with my space. And do you listen? Again, this is something that Sterling talked about. Listen to learn versus to do. This is a huge difference, and it's something that I want everybody to think about. There's research out there that suggests that 90% of us listen and are preparing for our response before the person has even finished sharing their information. It's so difficult to understand others and really hear and get what they mean in your heart and gut when you're in your head, or Mary Frances, is in my head preparing my defense about why I'm right. Okay. So to appreciate yourself, take your time with yourself, allow yourself just to be who you are and to create new. And when you're engaging with others, you always follow through. And anytime you're engaged with another individual, group, or organization, your main purpose is to learn. Okay? And you learn by what? By building your understanding. Okay. So also make a little note of this. I'm not sure about your community too much, but I am learning. And the question is, do you all talk about neuroplasty very much? It's a joke, actually. I know you don't. So neuroplasty is the idea that our brains can take information in and change our thoughts, our perspectives based on our experiences. And by the time we all come middle-aged, and I understand most of us are middle-aged, maybe female women, but middle-aged anyways, our brain has become very calcified in what we know and what we think is right. Right? So what you're doing in this moment of understanding and learning is you're reframing your neuroplasty. And it's possible, it happens every day, okay? But that allows us to deal with the discomfort and the fears that are associated with the unknown and learn by new experiences, okay? So as you all think about creating individual relationships, group or organizational relationships, you're always creating a shared purpose and goal. And you're articulating that shared purpose and goal. And the goal can be very simple as no harm to cats. Or, as someone has suggested earlier, better, more foster care for cats. And you hang on to that focus and that purpose intensely, okay? And then you learn about and respect the practices and values of others that are in your group or that you're in one relationship with. So if we're going into the community, I live in Minneapolis. I live in Robbinsdale. I live a block from North Minneapolis. And if I'm I just moved to the neighborhood. So if I'm going into the neighborhood and I'm going to be engaged around cats and their welfare, people are very different than me. I'm African American, but I'm new to the community and I have no idea what's going on. So what am I doing? I'm learning and I'm listening and I'm respecting what I hear other people say about their experience with cats or what's already happening in the community with cats or how cats are making their life miserable. I respect all of it. And I learn about the community's goals. I learn about their goals. Again, Sterling said maybe the goal is less for the store owner. Maybe the goal is that cats aren't frequenting out front and there aren't maybe cat poo or smells, who knows? But that's that store owner's goal. And so you align your work around that goal. Because that shared goal of not having cats external to the grocery store is consistent with the larger goal of no harm to cats or more foster care for cats. And then you can talk about how do we have more foster care, how do you, right? And so you really have to support what's already happening in a community and value that. Figure out how to bring it back to your goal and value that. Let me move this here. Okay, I have to move that over here. So there's also interesting ways to diversify your relationships, right? And just to do outreach and learn. So I've worked with a lot of groups that have done writing to, letters to the editors of their community newspapers, talking about the issues or the opportunities or what's happening in a community. And for this, it would be around cats and pets. And maybe even if things aren't organized in, we'll go North Minneapolis or Robbinsdale because I'm in both communities. Each has their own community paper. So maybe I'm talking to the grocery store person and finding out more that's happening. And I write a letter to the editor talking about those, I was at such and such Hy-Vee here near my house. And we're working with the owner and this is what I'm learning. And these are places to go in which if you do see cats, or these are places to call if you do see cats. Okay. So you're really going where people gather and know each other and being a part of that community versus coming in, right, and stating, this is the goal. Look at the calendar of events in a community, celebrations, parades, fundraisers. I mentioned I was from Iowa. We have a lot of community celebrations in rural Iowa. And parades are happening in every little community because they celebrate anything from rural communities. We celebrate everything from the turning of the leaves to, who knows? I can't even think of some, but it's flowers, right? Then you engage with groups and individuals, and you organize around that. Okay. Rural communities, one of the areas that I found a lot of success is really the volunteer firefighters groups and departments, civil entities, and local bars and the post office. Okay, so these are ways to which to both get to know the community, expose yourself to the community, and start to diversify your relationships. Okay. It's not letting me change my page. There we go. And so when you're in the moment, because for the people that are more introverted, I'm an extrovert, so I'm always taking time to talk about people who are more introverted, because relationships usually are around verbal interactions, and people that are on the spectrum of being less outgoing really have a you need to journey. The journey is more of a struggle and opportunity of really communicating and talking. So I'm always about sharing your passion and your goal. My name is June. I am supporting ways to ensure that cats down at the Hy-Vee with the manager. Tell me how you're experiencing cats. Are there any opportunities that that we could support what's happening? Are they have you seen, inquire me, have you seen cats in the community that may have no homes or owners? Right. I would like to support your work. How could I do that? You're a part of setting the tone of being a solution to support their needs without taking it over. Right. So here are some of the do's and sort of don'ts when you're diversifying. You do, you learn, you listen. And really, if you're new to a community, or even if you're TAR and you're engaged with each other, you're just learning and you're listening about them without judgment about how they're doing it, when they're doing it, right or wrong. You're learning and listening for what's important and where you're united in your passion around cats. And then you talk about that goal and that passion. You keep it high level. We don't get into the nuances of the practice and right or wrongs. You celebrate your goal. When people are more quiet, I encourage you to just say, you know what, I'm a little more quiet. Whatever it is you're comfortable sharing about yourself. That helps very much build trust. And people will understand if you sit back more and you don't seem to be engaged, they won't mistake that for lack of passion or value of them. And if you're outgoing, you say that too. I do that a lot. I'll say something such as I'm engaging in a community group last week that, I have a lot of thoughts and opinions, and what I'm trying to do right now is just listen and understand. And if there's some times where you think I'm not listening, you just gotta let me know. But you gotta mean it. Builds trust really quick, and people can let their shoulders down. Okay? Share your resources. So if you do have ideas or resources or telephone numbers to share where people can be connected to shelters, share those willingly. Don't hold your resources close to you. By sharing your resources, it also lets you know that you can be trusted. You're not just there for yourself. And ask others to support your learning. New here in Minneapolis and in Robbinsdale, and I've got my neighbor here. I don't know too many people, so as I'm meeting neighbors, I ask them to help me understand what's happening related to cats. And there are actually quite a few things going on in our community here for cats and pets generally. So and show you care, and then always follow up. Right? If you say you're gonna get a telephone number, you make sure they get that telephone number, right? If you say you're going to send an email, you make sure you send an email. And if it's late, you apologize for, oh, I wanted to get this to you 2 weeks ago and I've been so busy. I hope you're well. Thank you so much for your time. And here are the don'ts. And the don'ts are hard because we are hardwired. Our neuroplasty is hardwired for correctness, for what we've grown up to know, for our passion. Okay. So don't assume people that don't care because they don't respond to you in the same way that you might respond to them or the way you might be hoping they do. If people don't know you or they do know you, a lot of times people will sit back and wait because they want to interact with you enough to be able to develop their own trust and sense of you before they engage more. So don't assume because people aren't engaged in a community with you individually talking or generally around cats that they don't care. Then you identify, as we said earlier, is you want to make sure that you don't share your concern in a judgmental way. In Robbinsdale, I see this happen, and this happened last week related to cats, and there's just no going on here, and I have an answer. Okay. Don't assume you have the answer. A comment was made earlier, and I love this. This is like you said, people say it the wrong way. We're talking about just when we're listening to people share what they're thinking about cats, what they're doing within their organization, what their purpose. They may not say it the wrong way. Maybe they don't understand. Well, in the world that we lived in, and in this world that we're growing and expanding our elbows and coming together around cats, what will be the right way and wrong way? If they say it in a way that's consistent with the goal of safety for cats, does it really need to be corrected? Is it really wrong? You don't want to assume that there's a right and wrong. Okay? Don't expect to be liked or accepted. And don't enter a community without doing your research, right? Okay. And remember that you will make mistakes. I'm almost 60. Oh, I shouldn't have said that. Well, I'm almost 60, and I work with Bree on a group, and we do diversity, equity, inclusion, and I'm always making mistakes because differences are vast. And individuals within an individual community or culture are even unique within that individual community and culture. So don't expect to take precision into your communication with others. You will make mistakes, and you just apologize and you move on. Say, I apologize. I appreciate you letting me know. No, I got that, and we'll move forward. And just remember, it's all not about you. It really is about your love, your beloved and care of cats. And so you can take your ego out of it, right? Let's see. Okay. So building understanding, this is kind of like a personal tool. I would encourage you all to take this and to build this more for yourself. It's on the left side, you have, these are questions you ask yourself. What is the goal? Why am I in this? Why am I in this work? Why is foster care so important? Why are cats so important? You really understand your passion around this, because the more you understand you and you can share that, the more this becomes about cat and about doing things correct, or even your fears. Okay. Who am I? Where am I from? Like, let's take me. I'm Mary Frances Wheeler, place of birth. I was born in Chicago. I'm Catholic, and my mom was very Catholic. She went to Catholic school. My political opinions vary, and I identify as African American. So when people see me, some of this they know about me, and others they don't. Okay. And then I talk to myself about what people see of who I am and what they don't. Just to remind myself that people are going to approach me in ways that aren't consistent with who I am as well. Okay. And then what are my perceptions of others and why? Other groups, other people that don't seem to care about cats, or people that seem to deal with cats in a particular way that you aren't supportive of. What is your perception and then why? And you're asking yourself, how much does it really matter when I'm thinking about my goal? And sometimes it does, and sometimes it does not. And then getting back to how would other perceive me and why? If I'm African American and I'm going into the community, I'm a very light-skinned African American, and let's say I'm in Robbinsdale doing my work, people might think I'm, when I was young, we were all black or white, right back in the day. in the 80s, people were black and white, so people would have thought I was black, but now they might, because the light's very light, they might think I'm maybe indigenous. I've been mistaken for being Jewish, all these sorts of things. But what are people's perceptions of me and why? Because of how I look. And so get a sense of you, build your understanding of you. Am I extrovert? Am I introverted? And do I get nervous when I'm talking to other people? Do I talk too much? Like, do your inventory and then cut yourself a break, because if you are going to go into a community, you go in with yourself. And all those things that you feel about yourself is what you bring to that moment. Okay. And then you spend a little time thinking about the community that you're thinking about entering into, or the individual, if you will, that you're speaking to or building relationships. Right? How can I learn about the other person or the resident in a particular community? Certainly you can just ask, right? And then community newspapers, right? How can I learn about values and practices and norms of a community? Values and practices and norms. Norms are, I like to use North Minneapolis. North Minneapolis is a very prideful community. The practices, there's lots of community celebrations at community organizations. And the norms are that generally people are primarily African American and white, and also a larger Latino community. Hmong community is growing there as well. So their norms vary quite a bit in terms of meals, foods, right, as well as some of their practices. So how can I learn about events and celebrations and gatherings? Asking people if you're going to be engaged. And how do I show my value of a community and its residents? Because people want to be valued if they're going to be in partnership with you in goal around cats and cat welfare. Okay. And how might my intentions be received and why? And this goes back to the, you're not there to necessarily be popular, right? You want people to see you, but you're not expecting people to jump up and down and to be excited. And some of the intentions of, if you're going into a community that you're not familiar with, the assumption will be there that you're being judgmental about who they are, or you feel like you have you have the answers to the issues. So all these things are what you're processing and thinking about as you engage with individuals in a community or in a group setting. Okay. Let's see if I can get the change. Okay. So just a quick overview. Your approach, your rationale, purpose, and goals. Understand your passion, goals, and purpose. Write them down. Think about them. This is the foundation of which you will build any relationship. And as you were talking earlier around different groups, 2 or 3 groups in a community doing the same work, treating each other with a little bit of malice and coarse, in fighting, right? You're going to be less likely to do all that. You can only control your behavior. You're going to be less likely to engage and be a part of that if you understand your passion, goal, and purpose, and you keep it up high. And as people come to you and they say things that are not maybe warm and welcoming, and maybe a little bit of infighting, you just get to respond and go back up. I'm here for this thing, and I know you're here for that too. You really keep it high, and you help people go back up to that high. Okay, versus being in the weeds around how someone handled, I don't know, anything, right? Maybe even the fundraising. Maybe you feel like someone took some of your resources and funders. Just try and really keep it high, and that you're all in this together on the same team. And then you just really accept that the cultural dynamics are difficult. They just are, right? And you don't expect them to be easy. And you prepare yourself as best you can so that you yourself can, I spelled judgment wrong. So you yourself can not be judgmental, so that you have more understanding. You can take a misunderstood moment and clarify and have that no longer be a misunderstanding, but clarity. Except that you're going to be a little bit nervous, and maybe even say, I'm going to be a little bit nervous about this. But accept the differences, even when you're all about the same team. Cultural differences bring us to an individual moment, especially when we have so much passion and care. None of us are paid for this. And we have thoughts about what's right and wrong. So just expect that, and then educate yourself and keep it high. And then pathways to diversifying your relationships. Go slow. Learn about yourself and build one relationship at a time. You know, I spoke earlier about really looking at the diversity of relationships, but even within large groups, you're still developing these relationships one individual at a time. Okay, and asking for help and being vulnerable. Okay.
That was excellent. Mary Frances, I feel like I just went through a therapy session.
A little bit is, Stacey and others, is our brains and our mental mindset is so powerful always, and you're trying to be as nimble as we can. And we've had 2 years or 3 years of COVID. We've grown up in our neighborhoods, in our communities. We're Catholic, we're non, we have all these things, and we bring all of that to this moment. And it's a moment it's a complex moment, right? Of really interacting around cat welfare. And it makes sense that you bump into each other. And, I also liken it, if this is helpful, you all, is that within the diversity and inclusion community, so many people have so many different opinions about the right and wrong of diversity and inclusion, right? So I could be in a meeting of 10 people around diversity and inclusion, and we might be having a discussion around this is philosophical and that's philosophical, and it just serves no purpose, and it's fatiguing,
right?
And you come back and you're like, ah. And so the thing you always are trying to do, you all, is keep it high, right? That we're here specifically to be more inclusive, and this is what it looks like, and that's what we're all going for, right? So in the community that you're working with, we're all driven around making sure that cats have safety, quality, aren't in the wintertime out, right? So whatever that is that's what you bring to it. And then you work on your plasticity of accepting people who come to this with different experiences and opinions.
Right. Finding your anchor first
You
and
got it.
and building from there. So I want to take this into a practical sort of case study mode
Okay.
for you. So I have run various what I'll call committees to focus on specific communities that needed more support, more access to spay neuter, because there were no veterinary clinics in that town. So, bringing a mobile clinic in, they originally didn't have, a unified group of residents that were doing trap neuter return in the community. So I would start these targeted projects in one community. External coming in, would meet at the city hall, and we put like a press release out and say, hey, if you care about cats, come to the city hall and we'll, start working, meet monthly, build a group, yada,
Right.
yada, yada. See what happens, what takes shape, and then down the road, that group splits away from me, becomes their own 501c3, and they stand on their own 2 feet and they operate that way. I've had that happen in a couple of communities. In another scenario where the community seemed to always depend still on the external folks supporting, and internally it didn't grow. It wasn't nourished, it wasn't watered, it wasn't helped in that way.
Yeah.
I believe a level of trust is important in that, in being able to let go. So in that scenario, there's a pullback in the community, but other groups surrounding have moved in. So like closer groups have moved in. So trying to wonder is like, as our organizations, when we go into sort of new territory or territory we believe needs help, going in, listening, understanding, how do we do that? How do we develop that trust?
Yeah. Thank you. First of all, so a couple words. First of all, territories is not a word that you're going to use, just so you know, or geographic areas. So you first sort of, you've done this plenty, Stacey. So you could school me on something. So as we talk, just feel free to like, oh, right. But it's when you're really engaging a community around something that is important to you. The first thing you want to do is learn about them. You're not doing anything to them yet. You're just learning. That was the point. So let's take Robbinsdale, or we can take Solon, Iowa, right? Or Johnson County, Iowa. I mean, I think rural and communities, they have very similar very urban and rural communities have similar needs and opportunities, right, for expansion. Let me just say that, statistically speaking. And so in a rural Solon or Johnson County, Iowa, your approach would be to really just read that community newspaper. Find out, you don't land in a place before you do your research about it, right? You're gonna maybe visit a church there or a synagogue or whatever it is and say, hi, this is what my organization does, and this is what we found out about what's happening here or not happening here. And I just want to find out, do you know people in your community that are concerned, right? You just really pull people in slowly. And it takes a little bit more time, but what happens is it triggers that trust piece. So once you talk to Pastor Jojo or JJ or Joanna, right? And you talk to the grocery store person, and you talk to and they've told you other people to talk to, you're building your network of relationships, and you're meeting people through relationships. So if you know me, Joanna, pastor, and I say, Stacey is important to talk to so-and-so because she's doing this, I've transferred my trust of Stacey into a community relationship. And that's really what you're trying to do a lot, as opposed to just have people come together to trust you because you're here for this. So you spend some time early on, even just a month or two, just building that way. and getting to know folks. And then you based on that, figure out what is the best way. Is it, Stacy, like you said, put something in the paper and say, come, if you are concerned about cats, come do this? Or do you say to those people, what's the best way to get something going? Oh, it's this. And then it's going to, on Friday, the fire people, volunteers are meeting. And that's a forum in which we can have, and that community person might even play a role. And I can support that community person talking to their community about it. Okay, as opposed to me, and I'm starting to become that resource, and you're already like giving people ownership, right? So if that's helpful, the more ownership you give, and the more you step back with be a resource and work with what's already happening in that community, the more likelihood you'll have your own entity evolve. And even if you step away and it isn't an entity, it'll be an entity in which that community works in that community, okay? Because our vision of what we think should happen there might not be appropriate for that community, possible, or even relevant. And I think that's the hardest thing to go, is to get to suspend the judgment about what should be and the expectation about what should specifically look like success.
Okay. I agree 100%. I agree with you on that, because, you know, the community where I would say, oh, this wasn't successful, the cats are still being served by a variety of other social service organizations.
You got it.
The local church is still receiving pet food, 1,000 pounds of pet food every week, and it's coming through different resources. You know, a spay-neuter clinic is providing the spay-neuter services for the residents in the community. So it's not going through this central hub. It's a variety of different organizations that are playing that role.
Yeah. And you know, I work with an organization, sometimes it's helpful to give examples that are like, and I think I work with an organization that work with like 100 churches and synagogues and religious in the Twin Cities area, right? And they're like, well, why aren't we getting more Black and like Somali? Why aren't we getting more the diversity? Because we're going to them and we're telling them this is what we do and this is how we do it. And it's all about the greater good of the community. And we know it's important in their community, but they're just not doing what we want them to do to fit in our system, right? And so it was really being like, how do you go back and say, with all my passion and all my excitement around this, culture matters. When people are different, culture matters. And so it might be a completely different system. That's very hard. And how do I let go of defining success? And so once this group could activate an individual that was had a similar culture as that particular synagogue, Somali woman, or a Hindu person, like you also want to express it in a way that respects their culture, and you can inform what you're doing, okay? And versus showing up to that synagogue or culture and maybe having gotten there, but still not really understand the culture, right? So even when you make that presentation, like we made 10 presentations, I'm like, but who made them? Well, I made them. I'm like, okay, good, okay, that's great and everything, but you know, well, not to be funny, but did you put your foot up? Like in Somali culture, and you know that you put your foot up, they all kind of step back, like you don't need that. That's offensive. Did you do these? Like there's all these little things around nuance, around culture that matters. Some really subtle, some overt, but it brings people to you when it makes them feel familiar to you and trusting towards you, as well as being able to then move forward with opportunities to engage more deeply. Okay. And then you find your cultural mavens. I think that's what Sterling was talking about, your person. I call them cultural mavens, right? That you know, there's 2 or 3 people that just keep showing up, and they're the ones that then you sit back and listen to, and you suspend your judgment about what you think, or even how they articulate something, or even like if it's reaching that goal that you think is important, and it engages the community's capacity That's your goal, not the solution. Your community's capacity is the goal for your long-term solution. Okay.
Yeah, and one thing I want to take even a step back earlier in your presentation, the talking about the listening, and I've watched a TV show, Amsterdam, and the medical show, and the guy who's the director, the first thing he always says to his staff is always, "How can I help you?" Right? How can I help you? How can I help you? And as leadership, and we are leaders, whether we like it or not, because we have these groups, we're leaders, and we are serving others. It's not us serving them. And so I try, whenever I get nervous, the first thing I'll say is, "How can I help you?" to try and put me back on track.
Yeah. I think so. Being of service is so important. Like I'll just say that if you come across as anything other than as in service, it just doesn't work, right? It's harder. It's an uphill battle. So, and there's so many different ways to be in service and to articulate that. So I think, it's rarely, and I always mess up. Rarely do I go and enter into a group or community without having done my research, without having to understand, and then also having a script of openers, right? And one of the things that can become a slippery slope is people not understanding, and you getting really caught in the issue, in the politics of the moment. And so mine are it's not about cats, but I'm gonna make it about cats, right? Mine would be that for the community of cats that we have, the one thing that is so important is to ensure that they are safe. And do you agree, or don't you agree, or how do you see that differently? Like pulling people in, how do you see that? What does safety mean to you? What does progress for cats look like to you in your community, right? And to pull people into, yes, I'm here to serve you, but also have them think about it in a complex way, right? In your neighborhood, in your house, in your, I don't know, I have cats around my house, actually, that I think the people that lived here before had cats, and they fed them out, and so they come around. So, and then I have the cat smell, right? Because they're around, right? I've got dogs, we're all good. I've had cats. But if that was a problem for me, right? If that was something, it's also how do we solve for the cat, but also how am I affected, right? And so you're saying, well, how does this affect you? How is it affecting your neighbors? Tell me more, right? Tell me more. And so I'm going to make it clear, in addition to how can I help, it's tell me about. Say more. Well, this was hard. How was it hard? Or we solved it this way. Well, tell me more about how you solved that. Celebrate them. Great. I didn't even think about that. That's a good way. I'm going to take that back and share some of that with other folks I'm working with, right? Acknowledge both your listening, affirmation of what they've been doing, and value of it, that you're going to actually take it and use it elsewhere, and then thanking them for their time. Yeah.
So you're, it's funny because well, a couple thoughts that are coming into mind here. A lot of the conversation we're having right now is similar to what conversations I've had in strategic planning sessions, needs assessments, SWOT analysis, all that kind of stuff. These are the themes that are coming through to me. I was like, oh my goodness, we do this for like our boards already, and now we're doing it, for this category.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not, some organizations have a hard time with the whole strategic planning concept and needs assessment concept ahead of time. But I think a needs assessment before you go into any community is really important. And then we have our outreach committees. I'm in charge of outreach. This is my outreach. And it's to use jargon, which yesterday we were told not to use any jargon. what, this external facing situation. And I'm thinking, well, gee, we have an outreach committee. Maybe we should have like a listening tour committee too, right? We should go on a listening tour because it's got to be a two-way street, internal and external.
Yeah.
And are we missing that boat when we're doing our strategic sort of conversations at the board meetings?
Yeah. So you bring such a good point. Community engagement is all about systems change. I don't mean to be all heady, but we talked about neuroplasty and whatever, but it really is about systems change. It's your brain and it's the systems that you're functioning in. So to your point, and in agreement, and if you have a specific question, let me know. I don't want to just chat. I don't want to just talk you up, but everything is about strategy. And if you can just sit down and say, if someone was coming to me, flip the script, right? And be on the other end of that. And then say, ask yourself real critical questions and then start over again. Because we all want to feel respected, heard, acknowledged, and we all understand we're also sort of different. Like I'm similar, but I'm also different. I got 2 arms, 2 legs, some of us have 1 arm, but we have, but our value structure is different. And community ownership is the goal. Not it is the cat and them safe, but it's community ownership of cats with safety. Okay? And so engaging with your outreach committee, maybe what you say, you don't create another committee. You can if you like, because all have different structures, but maybe you decide that the outreach committee, there's a process that we always use, and you can call it outreach, listening and outreach. Like right. You put it in a listening and outreach. And then the first part of the listening is doing your research, asking questions. And then before you get on to your formal outreach, you bring that back to the organization and saying, this is what we're learning. Oh, it's kind of different than you want to bring them along. Oh, this is not what we expected. Oh, this is kind of it. This is what else? Oh, these are the nodes. And then this is what we're thinking about doing next with the outreach, because you're not just moving your committee, you're actually moving your entire team. And so if an outreach listening community says, oh, we're going to do this differently, and this, you have to bring all those people along with you who didn't have the beauty of all your listening and outreach to learn that. So, there's no right or wrong way in how to structure it, but you want to make sure that you're listening. And based on what you're listening, you're informing your outreach, and then you're going to be wrong about it, because we're always wrong. I'm telling you, y'all said, I get it wrong every day, right? So it's not about being right. And if people come down on you for being wrong, I just apologize. I'm like, oh, they said them there instead of he, she. I'm like, look, I'm 100 years old and I'm going to make mistakes. And I respect you and I will, right? So we come back into this and say, so now don't use that barriers for us wanting to be right, like the neuroplasty being right and that change. Don't get caught in that. Say, yeah, I'm going to make mistakes. And as a group, we'll make mistakes. And we just honor that and we keep moving forward. And we keep moving forward. Why? Because cats are the goal and community ownership is the vehicle. Okay?
And there, in the cat world, I think we all know that there's lots of gray in there, and that there's no, I think the words of right and wrong are, I might be right today, but that might be wrong tomorrow, right? It's like, it's in our world, I will use a combo test. We test our cats for feline leukemia and FIV, and at any given moment, they can test positive for that disease, but tomorrow they can test negative and fight it off. And so it's like, I feel like often with all of this, with language, it's this ongoing organic piece that's traveling around, and it's trying to understand what makes you comfortable, what makes me comfortable, how can we converse together in a way so that we're both comfortable enough to be able to share, to be honest, and trust one another that we're both working towards, in a similar direction. We may not even know what the goal is, but we're willing to get on a path together.
Yeah. And, I think Stacey, if you asked me, so what are the 2 important things to do when you're getting and you're in that first phase and is, going out and listening. But once you sort of gather it and you figure out what might be a collective goal, is to write it down and make sure that everybody that you've engaged with can see that goal and further inform it.
Yep.
Okay, like you're really getting in that ownership. And does this feel right? Is it consistent with what you said to me? Are there opportunities? And if they're like, well, they have all these other ideas, you say, okay, great. And maybe those other ideas are a pathway later. Like you have to organize it for people because they're passionate about it, right? Because they're going to want to put everything in there. Because passion is emergent, right? It's not necessarily organized, but you're trying to navigate both of those spaces. And so once you get that written, really big in writing, I'm big in writing. So even when you have each one of your meetings, you're talking about it in your virtual, you put that goal right up there, and then you talk about it even before you start the meeting. And you know what, y'all, we're going to have other things that come up. And I might ask you to bucket some of that, and we'll put it in the bucket here because that's something that we need to, that's related to it, but it's in the next conversation. So you're always helping people take their passion and know that something's not going to get lost. But you need to visually write things so people see it and they start to believe it. There's what we read and believe something after 7 times, it changes our mind, right? And it really gets into our mind and our body and soul. So you're dealing with how the psychology of how we change and grow, and the role that passion has in mixing things up, but also keeping people at the table, and their value in needing to be able to see their passion take place, even if it isn't in this moment, like their issue, there has to be a pathway down there that'll even get dealt with, if not today. And then they can sit back and participate. Okay, now I can vote, now I can, yeah, right. But if I can't see it, if it's not written, I'm gonna go left and right. I tell people all the time, because meetings can be, meetings, I've been in Wild West meetings, right? And I don't know how they write, right? Like that, you're like, wait, we're here to talk about this, we're here to talk about what? And you come back, well, what did we decide? Well, it felt good because we talked about it, but what's next? So that's very important, is to bring people along visually, writing, making sure they're checking on the overall goal and purpose. It's articulated in a way that they see themselves in, changing if it isn't. And then when you meet and you move, you continue to make it visible and say what we're dealing with today. And if you're concerned because we're not getting to something, let us know now, right? And we'll make a plan. Okay. But those Wild West.
Yeah, I mean, you just described general excellent sort of hygiene for standard meetings anyway. I mean, each meeting should have an objective, should have a goal, like this is what we hope to achieve tonight. And, there are differences of the in-person environment versus the virtual versus the struggling to hybridize. Lots of challenges around all 3 of those venues, but also many small organizations will have a board meeting once, maybe twice a year.
Yeah.
And that's very limiting in the time to get a group of people together to work on who they are, and then the identity of the organization itself.
Yeah, and I'm going to be really upfront. I feel like you do cats and cat welfare a disservice if you aren't doing that upfront. Because what happens is we're individuals running around with very good intent and passion, but it's structure that helps change the environment, right? And so if an individual is not a structure, you can change the moment, but you don't change things long term. And so, you feel good about that moment. And you really do, right? Because those little moments matter for the bigger ones, right? But if you're engaged in something and you have a long-term objective, if you aren't uniting around that, even if you only meet twice a year, if you aren't spending an hour coming together around this is really who we are, like, and touching base on this, even sending out the email every session, so you're going to end up using time and possibly creating frustrations with the folks that are involved, as well as leaning into misinterpretation and a lot of the things that I put in the presentation, because it's necessary to build something together, to be together, to know each other, and to build trust and understanding. Without that, we're a bunch of individuals having good intentions, which is, which has an impact, but it's not the structural impact that I hear that you all really want to have long term. It actually can counter it and make it more difficult and create more heated engagement, right? And I think maybe I heard a little bit of that earlier with Sterling about the individual groups. And when I say individual, it doesn't mean it needs to be one. It could be an individual group, a smaller group of 3 or 4. But if it were, I'm a pie in the sky person. So if I had the issue here, I would probably like find out all the dispersed organizations that were doing something, talk to all of them, say, hey, you're doing this, you're doing that, put an email out to them and say, hey, this is how we're all doing this together. This is exciting. And there's some opportunities. Does anybody want to talk some more about how we maybe kind of have some unity in this work? Let's talk about that. And maybe it's only 2 people come up and talk firstly, but that's 2 organizations that were desperate and now they're together, right? And so you're also just building, and you're like, well, we're all volunteers, we didn't take it. But when you're doing it, once you do it a couple of times, it doesn't take time. It's more time effective than having the other approach. In energy, because it's nothing worse than being in the same space with someone. And I go back to my IDIs and you're like, but we're on the same team, dude. Why are you, there's that takes more of you than we really understand and can take away from the opportunity. So
I mean, and it certainly is not ideal, but I'll share a story about an online group that I've been a moderator of since 2004, called Mass Cats, which was originally started. We had what was called the Trappers Network in Massachusetts, which was very old school, just a spreadsheet where we would refer trappers from one community to another if we got a request for assistance and it was sort of outside of our area. So
okay.
Like if I'm in Boston and someone called from Springfield, I would refer the call to my trapper friend in Springfield, and then they would return to Boston. So we had that, and then in 2004 we formalized it as like a Yahoo group at that point in time, and so it built up to like 400,
wow,
and emails, and it's continued, and it morphed into assisting hoarding situations because in those period of time, a lot of organizations would shoulder the burden of a hoarding situation on their own. So taking in 100 cats would take them months to deal with. Well, when we had a situation with 110 cats, they were all dispersed out in 5 days to each group, a lot of groups took 10 cats.
Perfect.
And it became this collaborative effort to be able to handle hoarding situations, so then organizations weren't faced with euthanasia decisions or space issues or that kind of thing. So it's all done on virtual so that it doesn't, relationships have been formed outside of it, but there's this connected community. And honestly, there have been spats on that group, people using inappropriate behavior, inappropriate words. I mean, as a moderator, you have to play that role, people saying maybe this isn't a group that should be going. And I'm like, hard conversations have to happen, right?
That's right.
Things happen, we grow, we live through it. And I think that's really important. And that the purpose of that group has changed now even more. Now it's, looking at Craigslist postings and people putting free cat or needing home for cat. And we're supporting the Craigslist because there are fewer hoarding situations out there than we've had in the past. And so the group changes and grows and that kind of thing. So it is a way for us to connect with individual rescuers as well as the larger organizations. There's ebbs and flows there, but it's not perfect for sure, but at least it is something.
Yeah, and perfection is overrated. I mean, the whole fear around what I think what you're really tapped into is how you can come together around an issue. And some people say, you know, you don't want to wait for an issue, but sometimes that's really clarifying, right? It can like help us get past our egos in our moment. So I want to, you organized around an issue, and then you also stayed in tune with holding space for appropriateness. And appropriateness is pretty big. I mean, you know, what's appropriate? It's not small, but there's certain things that you just don't allow. You know, how we speak to each other, right? Certain things that are, and you hold space for that, you'll be operating forever, Stacy, because that's what people need. People want to show up, people want to be engaged, but they also don't want to use their time negotiating chaos around individual personalities. And even the person with the individual personality, even though they might not think they do, they kind of respect and have a respect for the person that holds that space, right? I'll say that too. So I kudos. I think those are how, I don't know if you've ever read a book called Emergence Strategy, you know, how things grow out of people and systems. It's and they build the solutions to them, build of a community issue or a new product, stay with me, come from the interactions, not from top down. So you see, and those are the best solutions that are most sustainable, right? And I'm just gonna across the board, and you know, those are the solutions we would like to have funded long term. Those that are just like grown exactly how you described it. That has a life that will live. So I don't know. Do you have any questions, Stacy, about?
Yeah, I've been keeping a lookout on the outside. We have just a couple more minutes. People have been putting in some comments in here. Everything's just basically just really affirming, you know, the comments that you're making, very thoughtful. I will also stress, I think it's important for us to think, and I think you mentioned it in one of the slides, is just to breathe, and slow is not a bad, I mean, slow or taking your time may save you time. It's a marathon, it's not a sprint, you know, and just be thoughtful. Let it go for a weekend. Think about it before you respond right away. Give it a break. Yeah.
You know, and I don't know how many of you are parents or, you know, right? Like even when my dog and my cat, you know, we're so, and right now I feel like it's extra burdened with COVID. Like we're just so reactive. And the more we slow down and let some things sit, the better we are. And then all more the trusting we are in our response, right? And the more we have to, and so say anything that you're doing that involves change, you go slow. And building relationships with people that you aren't familiar with. You know, if you've and I've done it recently, so like I say, we all make mistakes. I assumed that I had developed a good relationship, and I got into some things, and I was like, oops, I missed this, right? And so it blew up because I missed it. Okay, and so you never lose. We'll go back and we'll recover it, but we're going back and recover it, and then we have to take care of the wounds and we have to put people together and arms back on, and right, I mean, exaggerating, but once something's a problem that could have early on in the stage of developing a relationship and understanding, is very hard to recover to. It takes more time. So take your time and just tell yourself you don't know nothing. That's like I don't know nothing. I thought I knew some stuff. Like I don't know nothing. My goal is not to know. My goal is to understand. Right?
Learn. We're all learning.
Mm-hmm.
We are all learning. We are all learning. Mary Frances, this was fantastic. Wonderful. I will tell you, I thought my brain muscles were hurting from yesterday. Now my brain muscles are hurting again, but it's all good. It's all good. This is all good exercise. And thank you so very much for joining us today.